When I was younger, I used to play football in the back garden of my parents' house, and I used to spend hours kicking a ball around in the back garden. And I remember reliving big FA Cup finals. I'd watch them on TV, then I'd go out into the back garden and maybe have some friends around, and we just relived what we saw on TV out in the garden, kicking a ball around for hours on end. It used to be great fun. But every now and then, the ball would get kicked over the next door neighbour's hedge. And I remember our next door neighbour on one side was a lady called Norma, an elderly lady, and she was a really keen gardener. She would look after her garden and the plants and things. And she wasn't too happy whenever we would kick the ball over. But you know what it's like, you're a young lad, the ball goes flying over the hedge. And so the challenge is to get over there and to get it back without being seen. So I used to crawl down to the bottom of our garden, and there was a little gap in the hedge between what was our side and what was Norma's garden. And I remember I would crawl through this gap in the hedge, wait at the bottom of her garden, hiding behind these trees. And when I was certain that she wasn't there, or she wasn't in the back window of her house looking out, then I'd make a break for it, and I would dash and I would grab my football, run across her garden to pick it up, quickly dart back into the bushes, through the hole in the hedge, and then back onto my side of the garden with the football. And I thought this was great. This was a little successful mission. I'd got the ball back. But every time, maybe a day or so later, Norma would speak to my mum and say, "Your James has been in our garden again." And of course, what gave me away every single time was the footprints of my trainers in the soil of her garden. I'd left an imprint when I'd ran across the garden, and you could see the shape of my trainers, the footprint in her soil, and it gave me away. The imprint that I'd left gave me away. So she knew, because I'd left this mark. She knew when I was over there. And I was thinking about that the other day in relation to living the Christian life, and how we can have an imprint and leave an imprint, or an afterthought or an aftertaste in people's lives. The Bible calls us to be imitators of God, to actually share his vision, his values with those who don't know him yet, to imitate God to others, that they might see something of him in us. And I was thinking about how I would leave this imprint on the soil of Norma's garden, and how we're called to kind of leave an imprint in people's lives that would point them towards Jesus. And this is something the Apostle Paul wrote about in 2 Corinthians chapter 2. Instead of talking about an imprint, he changes the metaphor, and he writes about leaving a fragrance of God with other people. In 2 Corinthians 2:14, he says, just to paraphrase that, he says that God uses us to spread the knowledge of Christ everywhere like a sweet perfume. He was explaining the way that God used him and other believers to share Jesus with others. It was as if through their lives, people who didn't know God got a sense of something different in the way that they were living. They got this scent, this smell, this fragrance. There was something different about the way the Apostle Paul and the other believers lived, which pointed people to Jesus. They'd left this fragrance, or to stick with my thought about the kind of the soil, they'd left this imprint which showed people, it pointed people towards Jesus. And that's really the thought I want to leave with you in this Rev Short video today. The challenge for you and I is to leave an imprint in people's lives, or a fragrance in people's lives that points them to Jesus, so that when we've been hanging out with people that don't know Jesus, they might say of us, "Man, there's something different about them. What is it?" And that it would be that God, through us, reaches out to people who don't know him yet.